The Macedonians showed love and generosity. The Corinthians lacked both. Paul's reference to the Macedonians' willingness to give parallels Jesus' commendation of the poor widow who gave 2 very small coins, which she could hardly afford. Paul says, our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but that there might be equality. But then, of course, if giving is by compulsion, it cannot be by grace. He is asking for equality of willingness and equality of readiness to give. Paul rightly considers himself the spiritual leader of the Corinthian church. He goes on to make the following points. He gives them credit for having started their giving program, but draws attention to their shortfall. Titus, who possibly has financial acumen, was to help them bring things to a conclusion. He notes their gifts in other areas, but gently points to the fact that their gift for giving falls behind their gifts in more attention-attracting areas. He resists the temptation to manipulate their guilt or impose legalistic requirements on them. Instead, he uses God's graciousness to them as the guide for their response in giving. Paul does not make mention of tithing, simply not regarding the Old Testament, seemingly not regarding the Old Testament practice to be binding on Christians. He holds up 2 models for their self-examination and self-comparison. First was the Macedonians, poorer but more generous. The second model was Jesus Christ, immeasurably rich in his sonship with the Father. The Corinthians were neither. The implications were that the Corinthians should be more like the Macedonians in one respect, but above all, become more like Jesus. He adopts the stance of an advisor. He gently lets them know that their shortfall is their problem, not his. He can advise, but they need to handle it. He applied the fundamental aim for counsellors that the person or persons being helped should face up to his or her or their problem and not be allowed to manoeuvre the counsellor into solving their problem for them. There is a distinguished New Testament and Pauline scholar by the name of Gordon D. Fee, who had a long career pastoring churches before turning to lecturing. He's currently Professor Emeritus for New Testament studies at Regent College, a very influential interdenominational Christian college in Vancouver. One of his highly regarded books is an 800 or 900-page tome called God's Empowering Presence. And it's an exhaustive study on the presence of the Holy Spirit in Paul's letters. To make the subject more, by the way, to make the subject more accessible, he produced another book called Paul, the Spirit of the People of God, which condenses the substance of the former book into a more digestible form for most readers. And it can be recommended for anyone who'd like to look into this subject. But he wrote another book also, in partnership with Douglas Stewart, an Old Testament scholar. And this was called How to Read the Bible for All It Is Worth. It's very well known. It's one that Carolyn mentioned here one time, and she appreciates. But at one point in this book, help is given in deciding which version or versions of the Bible we might choose, giving the respective characteristics and merits of some of the most popular. And among these, the Message gets a mention. And for those who might consider that the Message should not be taken seriously, let me tell you that in Gordon Fee's opinion, the interpretation of 2 Corinthians in the Message surpasses all translations in terms of its conveying meaning and sense. And so a large proportion of the remainder of this talk will be extracts from the Message, the language which makes it self-explanatory. Paul says, and now a personal but important matter. I write in the gentle but firm spirit of Christ. I hear that I'm being painted as cringing and wishy-washy when I'm with you, but harsh and demanding when at a safe distance writing letters. Please don't force me to take a hard line when I'm present with you. Don't think I'll hesitate a moment to stand up to those who say I'm an unprincipled opportunist. They'll have to eat their words. The world is unprincipled. It's dog eat dog out there. The world doesn't fight fair. But we don't live or fight our battles that way. Never have, never will. The tools of our trade aren't for marketing and manipulation, but are for demolishing that entire, massive, corrupt culture. We use our powerful God tools for smashing warped philosophies, tearing down barriers erected against the truth of God, fitting every loose thought and emotion and impulse into the structure of life shaped by Christ. Our tools are ready at hand for clearing the ground of every obstruction and building lives of obedience into maturity. And what's this talk about me bullying you with my letters? His letters are brawny and potent, but in person he's a weakling and mumbles when he talks. Such talk won't survive scrutiny. But what we write when away, we do when present. We're the exact same people, absent or present, in letter or in person. Paul now turns from his Corinthian critics to the visiting apostles, who it seems are making comparisons within their group and between their group and Paul. We're not, understand, putting ourselves in a league with those who boast that they are our superiors. We wouldn't dare do that. But with all this comparing and grading and competing, they quite miss the point. We're sticking to the limits of what God has set for us. We're not barging in on the rightful work of others, interfering with their ministries, demanding a place in the sun with them? What we're hoping for is that your lives grow in faith. You'll play a part in our expanding work. If you want to claim credit, claim it for God. Paul tells the Corinthians that he has promised them to Christ. I promised your hand in marriage to Christ, presented you as a pure virgin to your husband. And now I'm afraid that exactly as the snake seduced Eve with his smooth patter, you are being lured away from the simple purity of your love for Christ. Accusations have been made that Paul is worldly, a fool and weak. These people really got stuck into Paul, you know. Paul denies the first, saying that the weapons of his warfare are not worldly, but possess divine power to capture the proud for a life of obedience to Christ. Then to their saying he is a fool and weak, he agrees. Though his agreement, in which he combines both charges into one, is stated in brilliant literary form and is full of pathos. Don't hold it against me if I continue to sound a little foolish, or if you'd rather, just accept that I'm a fool and let me rant a little. I didn't learn this kind of talk from Christ. Oh no. It's a bad habit I picked up from the three-ring circus preachers that are so popular these days. Since you sit there in judgment seat observing all these shenanigans, you can afford to humour an occasional fool who happens along. You have such admirable tolerance for impostors who rob you of your freedom, rip you off, steal you blind, put you down, even slap your face. I shouldn't admit it to you, but our stomachs aren't strong enough to tolerate that kind of stuff. Since you admire the egomaniacs of the pulpit so much, remember this. Remember, this your old friend, the fool, is talking. Let me try my hand at it. Do they brag of being Hebrews, Israelites, the pure race of Abraham? I'm their match. Are they servants of Christ? I can go them one better. And then, I can't believe I'm saying these things. It's crazy to talk this way, but I started it and I'm going to finish. I've worked much harder, been jailed more often, beaten up more times than I can count, and at death's door time after time. I've been flogged 5 times with the Jews' 39 lashes, beaten by Roman rods 3 times, pummeled with rocks once. I've been shipwrecked 3 times and immersed in the open sea for a night and day. In hard travelling, year in, year out, I've had to ford rivers, fend off robbers, struggle with friends, struggle with foes. I've been at risk in the city, at risk in the country, endangered by desert sun and sea storm, and betrayed by those I thought were my brothers. I've known drudgery and hard labour, many a long night without sleep, many a missed meal, blasted by cold, naked to the weather. And that's not the half of it. When you throw in the daily pressures and anxieties of all the churches, when someone gets to the end of his rope, I feel desperation in my bones. When someone is duped into sin, an angry fire burns in my gut. If I have to brag about myself, I'll brag about the humiliations that make me like Jesus. The eternal and blessed God and Father of the Master Jesus knows I'm not lying. Remember the time I was in Damascus and the governor of King Aretas posted guards on the city gates to arrest me? I crawled through a window in the wall, was let down in a basket and had to run for my life. So Paul is saying, if you're going to boast, then beat this lot if you can. And he goes on. You've forced me to talk this way, and I do it against my better judgment. But now that we're at it, I may as well bring up the matter of visions and revelations that God gave me. And then, for instance, I know a man who, 14 years ago, was seized by Christ and swept into ecstasy to the heights of heaven. I really don't know if this took place in the body or out of it. Only God knows. I also know that this man was hijacked into paradise. Again, whether in or out of the body, I don't know. God knows. He's talking about himself, of course. There he heard the unspeakable spoken, but was forbidden to tell what he heard. This is the man I want to talk about. But about myself, I'm not saying another word apart from the humiliations. Paul suffered from an affliction, a handicap, which he referred to, but we don't know the nature of it. He calls the handicap a gift, so that he wouldn't get a big head. He prayed to God to relieve him of his problem. 3 times he prayed. And then God told him, my grace is enough. It's all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness. Once he heard that, he stopped focusing on the handicap and started appreciating the gift. He just let Christ take over. The weaker he became, the stronger he became. He says to them in his letter, this is my 3rd visit coming up. On my 2nd visit, I warned that bunch that keeps sinning over and over in the same old ways that when I get back, I won't go easy on them. Now I'm preparing for the 3rd, and I'm telling you, if you haven't changed your ways by the time I get there, look out. And you have been demanding proof that Christ speaks through me. And you, who have been demanding proof that Christ speaks through me, will get more than you bargained for. You will get the full force of Christ. Don't think you won't. He was sheer weakness and humiliation when he was killed on the cross. But oh, he's alive now, in the mighty power of God. Test yourselves to make sure you are solid in the faith. Don't drift along taking everything for granted. Give yourselves regular checkups. I'm writing this now so that when I come, I don't have to say another word on the subject. The authority the Master gave me is for putting people together, not taking them apart. I want to get on with it and not have to spend time on reprimands. And this is getting to the end of his letter. And that's about it, friends. Be cheerful. Keep things in good repair. Keep your spirits up. Think in harmony. Be agreeable. Do all that, and the God of love and peace will surely be with you. Greet one another with a holy embrace. All the brothers and sisters here say hello. And we will use the closing words of Paul's letter as our closing prayer or benediction today. May the amazing grace of the Master, Jesus Christ, the extravagant love of God, the intimate friendship of the Holy Spirit be with all of you. Amen.
Please stand and sing. In the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow. 2 years and some tests. So you've seen the doctor and they're organised it.
I said to him,
Got some company, you don't want to be on your own, or you just don't want to be on your own. Let's get back to your stamp collecting.
I bought these shirts for $3 to $5.
So it doesn't mean this particular, is it the stamp collecting month, or was that another month? Because we're always asking for stamps here, keeping the stamps. Years of Australia Post. Lauren, you've got some good t-shirts. Is this one that you did? No.
Hi boys, here you go.
When are you going to go?
I think it's around June.
Yeah, I protested.
Oh, do you?
Wasn't it good? We need more, don't we?
Every morning.
Yeah, oh, that's good. I'm pleased you enjoyed it. That's good. I'm pretty busy at the moment. My daughter gets married next month.
Oh.
In Sydney, and I'm trying to organise a whole lot of stuff, but now that we're up here, I'll try. Yeah, I've done a fair bit of work outside the church. You know, like we've done with all these drug addicts and all that sort of thing. It's very sad out there. It's in a little box. Speculated to a certain extent, but you know, out there's a lot of I know it's very sad, but well, I'd say it's only good for you somehow, but that's really sad.
I tried to talk to him about it.
No, I think she's sort of because I think
I noticed this before.
Yeah, well, what is life there? I've always got a big brain. It's all right. But you have a good week. And, you know, you keep your chin up and be sometimes go up a little If you don't, you have to get it on you. See you later, boys.
I don't know how this big shit is going. I think I have to go and
That was.
You know more than me.
Because I had to go there again.
Oh, you only been there 3 days a week.
Robert.
When you're as young as this guy, you probably look 70.
I'll take the guess at your age. I'll say you're about 70.
Just leave it at that. Oh, what about that? Oh, wonderful. What about?
You'll have to be the old son, Daddy.
A bit of a flapper.
No, the one she plays painted.
Oh, that's it.
Unless Francesco gives me a ring, I don't know. I'll leave it to work, so I just saw let you know they're going this week, so.
Yes, you did mention Friday. Oh, really? Oh, I see. Stick it out for a lawyer. Size, that's
And this is now 3 months or 4 months, and I haven't heard anything. And I said, oh, sorry, we lost this or that, or of course put in somebody else's file, and we have excuses, or they are so bad that they can't find your stuff. And you get the impression, that they're just
You've got to set that date, haven't you? Some of the things include join the camera, whenever they go away for a weekend, it makes them use it, and that's what makes them get away. Everybody knows that everybody knows that's what they can do wrong.
I think it was this week. Thursday, probably.
Might make you up there one day, just like anything I read
But we think they just say that
Yes.
Sorry, I have to close that window.
Even
Josh Morris on that.
What else do I know?
Yeah.
What they sort of can, it's just an area, set aside, incredibly grass, just grass, flat grass, toilet block, no showers, don't have to shower, and just a water point. And $5 a night, that's it.
That's what they're doing in Broadview, the council, making the showroom and all that.
Oh, is that what it is, the
Yeah.
showground?
Yeah.
We thought it was that bit beside the bridge. We just assumed that was
No, they had a big bash there, a bash.
Yeah, the best.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that's it. I'm pretty sure it was the showground they're having that. And it's just when they have big motorhome tests and things,
Yeah.
anybody can be on site, disagree with them.
That's very good idea.
Send everybody.
There's no carrying on.
No.
No, well, they can do that, nobody's going to.
Yeah, well, that's what they're thinking of doing.
Especially
To
when
encourage people.
people come off the
Yeah,
highway and
that's
pull the deer. Once that bypass goes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Home Hill, we went into the showground at one stage, and he just decided to close the council closed it. Well, day before, council closed it, and because of insurance. Oh, McLean was the same, wasn't it? They closed it the next day. Yeah, because of insurance, which is a good job.
Yeah.
Most of them caravans are running like that.
But Home Hill's the one that's got police.
It is now, yeah.
They've got a hole, mate, that's the funeral.
About 3.5
Park
years.
alongside the railway line, and they've built a block, which is right in the middle of the CD there. Either side, it's just a big brick building, camp kitchen, all stainless steel camp kitchen, toilets, showers, free.
Because otherwise it's only passed through the town.
Effective, and they allowed to stay 3 days in the street. They're allocated for all people in that.
Yeah, excellent. That's travel as far as you can, if you've got time to leave.
We might get as far as we can.
So how many hours do you travel in a day?
We do no more than 300 cars.
We settle in it. Before we started, we settled in it. 300 kilometres is
Maximum.
And why kill yourself?
So from here,
Oh, well, especially if that's all you're doing.
I think from here to Prema's only just over 200 cars.
Yeah. But often we get lucky or something like that. But we don't push ourselves.
And Durham, we stay there sometimes on the Castle Road River. That's pretty good.
And Durham's got a
And
massive
they've got a
overlay
big
on the
overlay.
river.
It's not it's just a flat grass area, right on the river, and they have a toilet, 2 toilets and 2 cold chickens.
And a hook for you, which is so big.
And a hook for people to put their solar bag on, so they can have a hot chair behind it, barbecue,
Yeah.
fresh water,
Plus the tenants don't want to.
top of the
It brings people. Yeah. They used to have 2 supermarkets, and last time we never had one. The survey, one of the surveys closed down. Yeah.
But it's nice to look at. Well, it's going really nowhere.
All of us 3 days like it.
But everybody,
Hey, listen, how can you be a grey nomad when you don't have any hair?
well,
Good question.
I'd say we've got to be green men. Old men are going green, and young men have visions.
Yeah.
You see the beautiful blue pens up on the top?
Aren't they fabulous?
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Ruth's. No, no, coming back.
Yes, Alan's still around.
Yeah.
Thank you. That little twiddle you did
It
during
was.
the menu was lovely.
Yes.
Yes, I did. It was
Yes.
so beautiful.
Everybody heard it.
It was just beautiful.
And it's just soft, that's